Pushing past the limit, tripping on hallucinogenics. A cigarette burned my finger 'cause I forgot to lit it. Ripping with my sinners, 'cause fuck it, man, I ain't no beginner. And then I crawled back to the life that I said I wouldn't live in. 'Cause I just couldn't open up, I'm always shifting. Find yourself a man who's strong and tall and Christian. Pushing past the limit, tripping on hallucinogenics. My cigarette burned my finger 'cause I forgot I lit it. Drunk in Seattle, two more dancing without a paddle. I don't remember your face or your hair or your name or your smile. I just couldn't open up, I'm always shifting. Go find yourself a man who's strong and tall and Christian. Pushing past the limit, tripping on hallucinogenics. And then I crawl back to the life that I said I wouldn't live in. 'Cause I carried on like a wayward son. And now I'm through and I've come undone. And now I am just but a wayward man, with my bloodshot eyes and my shaky hands. Because I carried on like a wayward son. Through and through I've come undone. And now I am just but the wayward man, with my bloodshot eyes and my shaky hand. Pushing past the limit, tripping on hallucinogenics. My cigarette burned my finger 'cause I forgot I lit it.
Woo! All right, a relationship with substances has been a part of nearly every culture, and so every spirituality that has ever been. Tonight, our relationship to substances as the very heart of spiritual life and practice, it is going to be a fun one. I hope you came ready for a discussion. Welcome to Collective. We are so glad you're here. I'm glad you're here. I'm Ben. I'll be your host for the service tonight here in kind of gloomy downtown DeLand, but you're in our living room from anywhere in the world at wearecollectivechurch.com. I hope you'll subscribe and stay connected. So does Brooks. Some of us have done this together hundreds of times. We had our Google walkthrough this week, which means that at some point in the near future, the next couple of weeks, when you search for Collective on Google, you'll be able to do a walkthrough of like the service area and the side entrance and all that stuff, kind of a virtual tour thing. But in the process, I was digging out stuff. We were looking to, kind of stage the room. If you've noticed, it looks a little better. And I found this like pamphlet that my buddy Clark had designed for a gathering we had in my living room like 15 years ago. Yeah, crazy. So whether you've done this with us like 100 times, or if it's your first time, and maybe it's your first time in anything like a church or a religious environment, thanks for trusting us. It takes immense courage, and your perspective keeps us fresh. So we want to begin by bearing witness to the courage that it takes just to get together, to walk in the doors, and to honor that with belonging. So whether it's a long time or your first time, you belong, and for us that means you're safe, valued, and equal. We say your presence makes us who we are. Welcome. And we're here, my goodness, the shrieks of joy. I'm going to decide it's joy. We're here not to be religiously entertained, but to do the good work of spiritual formation, that is making a good life as good people. Thanks to our musician, Andrew Brooks, coming to fill in for artists in residence. All right, yeah, for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah. Running the house and playing the bass, Brandon. All right, we're doing applause again. This is good. I like this. Behind the bar, Dan Hensley, back from the COVID. He's fine, better than ever. Fantastic. Mary, back in the back, running slides, also filling in for Brandon. Well, that was lackluster. That's rude.
Yeah.
My goodness. Yeah, Mary. All right. Fantastic. Good. You may notice an empty seat. Kenny is not with us tonight. He is on a much-deserved break, and we are going to express our gratitude to him. He's had a particularly tough week, on a month, on a year, on probably a decade. So what he needs to know from us is how we genuinely feel, which is that we're grateful. He's sort of a quiet part of what we do here, but an important part. And we just want to let him know. So Michelle has a card. And so if you'd find her, if you don't know who Kenny is, he's the one that co-hosts with me every week. He sits in the chair over there. He does the rundown. He's our director of communications. He's been one of my best friends for about 10 years, but he gets what we do here. He has the heartbeat of this place in his chest, so we want to tell him we thank him for that. Yeah, June, how can I help you? Say again? Oh, almost, I know. Stone Cold Diva. He'll be up in a second. We all are Collective Church. If you're online with us, we're going to talk to you in just a second. Thanks for being with us. Does somebody want to remind us what that means by coming and reading the community statement? No, June, you're going to sing. Let's give somebody else a chance. I know, you're like the kid in class that wants to do everything. And I love it about you. Voluntold. I like it. And there's, yep.
There's one up there, yep.
We value highly the metaphor of journey. We're different people from different places and backgrounds, representing an intergenerational community, and we've traveled different paths. So we agree not to make assumptions about the person across from us, next to us, or in conversation with us. We challenge ourselves to be sensitive, knowing this community includes a diverse group of people, from lifelong followers of Jesus to people who are just now open to the idea that God might exist. We strive to avoid offense, ask good questions, articulate and explain our responses. We don't assume fluency in the Bible, spirituality, or church language, because we believe the message of Jesus is not for Christianity, but for humanity. So we do everything in the spirit of love and grace.
Thanks, June.
Different paths. We're beautiful people with messy pasts, so have no fear, no judgment here. Whether you believe in Jesus or don't believe in anything, there's something you can teach us. You belong. No right, no wrong. Leaning into finding God in me. is full of mystery, and solidarity helps us to find some peace in the great unknown. You don't have to be alone, no, leading into grace. Help us make a place with an open table, no one turned away, where love without light, and no one has to hide, finding God and people, sharing hearts as equals, where you are held in light, and good news is on your side. Whoa,
Thank you, June. Fantastic. If there are any kids that have not yet gone to hang with Miss Darlene, we do starting this week. Oh, you wanted another applause as you go. Okay, thank you. Wow. Fantastic. Yeah, oh, that was for Miss Darlene. So any kids that want to go, I mean, I think it's just Kieran. If you want to go, you can hang Kieran. But Miss Darlene's here. Starting this week, we have collective kids stuff. Every week again. I want to say through the end of the year, but who knows? It's been a weird couple years, right? So we have it scheduled through the summer. We're going to have amazing kid helpers from Miss Darlene, who has them this week, to Ella Shepard, who we know, Jenny Beth Joyner, who runs the Create Space, and we added to our team this week, Jordan Canova, I believe, or maybe Jordan Smith. Anyway, we've got a great team. They're going to do amazing stuff with collective kids. We've said it, we've sung it, we have an opportunity to build a movement. But in order to build a movement, we have to know one another. It's nice to see some new faces. It's nice to see a lot of familiar faces too. Let's talk to each other. So if you're willing to share with someone next to you, quick answers, 3 minutes on the clock. What are you guys doing? Hey, what are you doing? You're going where? Oh, aren't you with Miss Darlene for kids stuff? Oh, you're there at the bar for hot cocoa. Fantastic. Cool. Good conversation. So we don't have Kenny here, so if anybody else out there wants to jump on Facebook and see if anybody's online and wants to talk to us, you can be the representative for the online community in the room. Kenny does that. Since he's not here, somebody else can do that. So we're going to have a conversation here. 3 minutes on the clock. How have substances helped or hurt the spiritual practice of you or someone you love? That's a loaded question. And you're like, oh, this doesn't relate to the kids in the room. What do you think they're up at the bar getting? Just sugar milk, absolute sugar substances. They're addicted to it. It affects their little brains almost as much as video games. See? Addicts, every little one of them. So how have substances helped or hurt the spiritual practice of you or someone you love? This is a loaded question. There's a lot of nuance. Let's remind ourselves of the house rules. The invitation is to share your perspective, not to colonize other people's. There are no me monsters. The goal is for everyone to get a perspective, an opportunity to share, not for you to get a platform. Kindness. Okay, so here's the question. Take 3 minutes and enjoy it. Get to know somebody. Go. Well, negatively and then so positively. I would say mind your own business, I guess. I think at the end of the day, for me, my use of substances is always public and is always integrity. My abuse of substances is always secrets and lies. And so I think I can never be spiritually well when I'm lying. And I think most of all, I'm lying to myself. I didn't write that for the sermon. That just showed up right now.
Yeah, I would say the same is true of me. I mean, there are like some things I don't talk about with everyone just because like
Sure, absolutely.
psychedelic mushrooms,
Yeah, they won't look at it.
Yeah, just because like it's still like illegal, it's
Sure.
still like
Yeah.
an issue. But I have been able to share with several people, how much it's helped me.
So cool.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, alcohol is a weird one
Yeah.
because it's like it brings people together, but it also tears people apart
Yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And Tori was having issues before she came back down to Melbourne, and we've been, using weed and a lot of other things to help like get her off that. But
Yeah.
she wanted to basically change her relationship to alcohol rather than like, never touch it again.
That's the whole sermon is like when is abstinence right? When is a relationship right? And both are okay, but that's spiritual formation. Like knowing yourself well enough to do that, that's crazy. All right, there's going to be more time for conversation, but let's bring it back together. Anybody want to share? Let's start with let's go bad news, good news. How have substances hurt the spiritual practice of someone that you love? You or someone you love. Terry, do you want to be the person who takes the microphone around to everybody tonight? Awesome, fantastic. Yeah, no, that doesn't obligate you to be the co-host unless I ask you to reply to anything.
But he does have a question to ask you about.
Okay.
Oh, it's over here on the couch.
No, that was the test and you failed, so sorry about that. Are you answering first or just taking it around?
I'm waiting.
Man, you got me. I formed that as a question. I should have just told you to answer. Darn it.
Don't ask.
Okay, next time. So a negative experience. How have substances hurt the spiritual practice of you or someone you love? Yeah, please. Thank you. Is that on, Terry?
It makes one lazy.
They make one lazy. Okay,
Yes.
yeah. So there are substances that make you lazy. Yeah, and I think as much as we might not want to admit it, as much as everybody wants spirituality to be happy feelings and unicorn puppies, at the end of the day, spiritual formation is a habit. And if you engage in substances that make you lazy to the point that you can't keep your habits, then you can't keep a spiritual practice. So fair enough. Thank you. Yeah, Marianne.
I think your focus isn't where it should be. It's not on God. It's not on your spiritual practice. It's on the substance and getting more.
Okay.
And getting that's.
Okay. So again, if a substance comes to be a distraction from your practice, your spiritual life. Oh, cool. Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, the online community. Thank you, guys. Thanks, Mary.
So we have Mayhill on
Hey, Mayhill.
Facebook, and they said, I guess substances block what's really going on. So even if it hurts, without a glass of Merlot or a soft chocolate chip cookie, it's better to feel than emotion.
Okay.
Oh, and they say hi back.
Yeah. No, okay. I like it. I mean, so the perspective that substances can be used to numb, to mask, to avoid, absolutely. Yeah. Okay, let's. So far. Now we're going to shift to positive. So now how about...
Are we limiting to illicit substances or...
No, absolutely not. I wasn't joking at all when I talked about the kids' addiction to sugar. I think that's as strong as any scheduled narcotic in the world. But that's my perspective.
Yeah, so when I was in the hospital a couple of years ago, I was out of my gourd on ketamine for 2-3 days and went on wild trips of what was probably not reality as we know it. And I think that not just that, but that combined with the whole experience really turned around my spirituality and my involvement with collective.
Yeah.
So,
absolutely. Okay. Anybody, how have substances helped your spiritual practice or that of someone you love? Joe.
Hey, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Yeah, go. You're up.
All right, so I think whenever I indulge in a little marijuana, I definitely feel like I am in a different world where I can connect better spiritually, where I can see colors brighter, or I can hear music differently. And if I take that energy, those enhanced senses, and apply them to religion or spirituality in general, I feel like I am more transcendent than if I don't have that in my system. Like I can get to a different level spiritually,
Yeah.
and it's beautiful.
Awesome.
So it's been a very positive experience for me.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. I've seen substances mess up the lives of so many of my family members. They've helped me to stay the heck away from them and get into the field that I'm in now. I began as an alcohol counselor, substance abuse, addiction professional, and now I'm a psychotherapist. But also, staying away from it has helped me to deal with reality as it is and open myself to dependence on God instead of a substance. So in a negative, positive way, it's helped me.
Okay. Anybody, how's the substance helped the spiritual practice of you or someone you love? Dave. We already had a mic busted once last week.
I think for me, when I was in my early to mid-20s, I didn't have very many friendships or relationships. And so alcohol was a community builder. It was one of the few places where sitting there to have one or two glasses of scotch was it allowed conversations to happen. I don't think it was because of the substance, but it was because it provided a space for the conversation to happen. So.
Andrew.
I have one.
Yeah, please.
Well, growing up in the church, one of the main phrases that people use all the time is like being born again, and I didn't really know what that experience felt like until I had my first experience with psilocybin mushrooms, and I felt like Joe was saying, like it opened up another dimension that I hadn't access to yet within me, within my spiritual being and existence. So I felt like totally my heart was open, my identity was just blown open. I felt like all the things that I've read in the scriptures about like identifying as like a son of God and being born again and all these things, like really I was feeling it for the first time in my life.
I grew up in a very dysfunctional home. My father became an alcoholic, and by him joining AA, it actually brought my family together. And before my father died, he had 55 years of sobriety.
That's awesome. All right. This is why collective. There's some different perspectives, and that's good. We need that. Let's remind ourselves nobody gets to be right? We're having a conversation about spirituality and if and how that serves us and serves our neighbor. We got a mic? Jerry, go for it.
All right. Excuse me. I drank for 10 years, and I thought, well, that doesn't qualify. I mean, there are people who were drunk longer than that. But at the end of 10 years, I realized I'm an alcoholic. And I said, I got to stop this, but I don't know how. And so on a beautiful Saturday morning with a sweating headache, I said, I got to stop this. It took about a year or so. But looking back on it, it seems that I was looking for love in all the wrong places. Looking for friendship, joy, peace, fellowship, camaraderie, and so on, to drinking in bars and so on. To some extent, it worked. I've had more heart-to-heart talks with bartenders than I have with anybody in my life, including parents. More solace, counseling and stuff. But it was kind of a, I guess, a makeshift faith or religion. The golden cup by the.
Yeah.
So it wasn't real. And when I got sober, and I had to because I'm a dad, I'm a husband, I can't do this. So when I finally did quit, lost a lot of friends.
Yeah.
And boy, was I glad, because they turned out were paper mache relationships. So
Yeah.
anyway,
Thanks,
it helped.
Jerry.
It helped, but it didn't.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to get to that for sure. All right, there will be more perspectives. There will be more time to chat, I assure you. We've said it, we've sung it, we've connected in the room. Thanks, Mary, for connecting us to the online community, Mayhill, and whoever else is out there. Thanks for being with us. So if you want to take the next step in practice with us this week, real quick, let's run through this. It starts with an email. So subscribe, select the rundown in that list of preferences, and then that rundown will become kind of your weekly dashboard for how we practice together. Art and Soul returns February 16th with Jenny Beth. Details are going to go live on Facebook this week. Fireside Moonrise is back on the 19th. Jim and Lynn's house, come out for that. It's going to be an awesome time. Snack time, we had a bunch of kids in the room. We sent them out. We announced that Collective Kids is coming up again weekly, and so that means we need you to bring snacks. So if you don't know what snacks kids like, ask someone who does. I was going to say don't worry about it, but we need your snacks. So yeah, chips, sweets, any of that stuff,
Snack
yeah, exactly. We'll wind them up and set them loose with the
substances.
Yeah, right. Thank you. Right. Bring some substances for our kids. Legal, non-controlled. I guess they're controlled, FDA. Yeah. They have to list all the drugs that are in them. I thought it was a me. So as always, the planning is the practice. Plan to do now what you might not want to do later in the week. Showing up, giving, and serving, that's how we practice together. Tonight, we have a special treat as we kind of downshift into our time of silence. Brooks brought us this gift. And so we're going to kind of listen to this. I'm going to invite you just to receive it. It's a gift, so here you go. Receive it.
Bluer than the cloudless April sky, hotter than the stars that scorch the night, twirling in the tear that you can't cry. God is in the looking of your eyes, happy as a dog laid in the grass, written in the nation's violent past, empty as the time you try to pass. God is in the questions that you ask. Sweeter than a blossom tangerine, crumbling like the breakers on the beach, different as the languages we speak. God is in the people that you meet, purest babies in their mother's arms, broken loneliest of hearts, deep within your soul, so torn apart. God is in the person that you are. April sky, hotter than the stars that scorch the night, swirling in the tears you can't cry. God is in the looking of your eyes. God is in the looking of your eyes. God is in the looking of your eyes.
All right, God is in the looking of your eyes. In a moment, we're going to sound the singing bowl and ask you to sit with us for a few minutes and gently returning to your attention, to your true self, to God, whether that feels like the very center or absence, emptiness, anywhere in between, sink into that. Breathe and listen. And look with the looking of your eye, your third eye, not your two eyes, but as you close your eyes, maybe 10 or 12 inches out in front of your forehead, the eye with which you see your inner self, your true self. Breathe and listen as if your senses are searching for something, open to surprise. Your mind will wander, come back to your breath without judgment, just notice gently to your breath. Use the drone footage as best helps to survey your inner landscape. May this silence allow us to contemplate what we want this ceremony to accomplish for us. Humility, spiritual rebirth, strength for what lies ahead. Breathe. It's all right. All right, take a deep breath and let yourself gently come back into this space, into this time, into this awareness. Our text tonight is from Romans 12. Therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you'll be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. Hear me out. This seems to be saying that spiritual practice, done right, is a mind-altering and mood-altering experience. The other translation of that word mind, transformed by the renewing of your mind, is the word attitude. So mind and mood-altering. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind or the renewing of your mood. The question tonight, should Christians drink alcohol? We're going to go so much further than that. You probably already realized that. Spirituality is about mind and mood-altering experiences. I'm just going to let that settle in for a minute. That's the starting point. Spirituality is about mind and mood-altering experiences. The question tonight is, what about our relationship with mind and mood-altering substances? I want to start just by making sure that we all understand that we daily consume mind and mood-altering substances with differing degrees of legality, social acceptance. Is there anybody that thinks they don't have mind or mood-altering substances on a daily basis? Cool, good. So we're all on the same page. Nobody's better than anybody. That's where we want to start. How about a sermon? Now, may the words of our mouths and the meditation of all of our hearts grant us not only the light of wisdom to understand these words, but the fire of conviction to put them into practice. The first time that I really evangelized, like tried to convince people to believe in God like my life depended on it, I was absolutely wasted drunk in Costa Rica. And 16 years old, my friend Pat had just hung himself. We had all gone to the funeral in a Catholic church where they said on top of him hating his life enough to hang himself, he also was going to get to go to hell for it. And I was drunk with my friends, pleading with them to believe that God was good, that Pat wasn't going to hell. And I didn't have the courage to do it sober, but shit, if I was drunk, I could say anything, and anything I really believed. I mean, that was cool. I was free. I started a church in a bar, and I wanted to be the pastor who would drink with you. And I drank like I did. My sponsor says, when you have to qualify yourself in a meeting, he says, I drank alcoholically. Substance abuse has kind of been a part of my shtick spiritually, right? From 16 years old on the beach to like the church and the bar. There have been some substances connected to that. And at the same time, I'm always chasing those substances in other ways. I've been an endurance athlete, long course endurance athlete for a decade. And I did this race 3 years ago, I guess. It was the January before COVID, or maybe the December before COVID. And we were doing an ultra endurance race. This was over in Tampa, and it was 3 10-mile loops. So I was going to run 30 miles. But it was on a dirt mountain bike track course that they close once a year to have this ultra endurance race. And the back part of the course was really beautiful in the daytime, but this was an all 24-hour race. So you had to run it at night also. And there were like these crazy like rope wood bridges that went over water, which you can only assume has alligators in it at night. And you're out there at night and it's not lit. I mean, you're running with like a headlamp. And so as you can imagine, my third run was at night. It was like 3 a.m, I think, when I left for my third 10-mile run. And about halfway through, with just a headlamp, nothing else, like a little spot of light in front of you in the dark, pitch black otherwise, I started to hallucinate. And it was a really good time. Some people call it a runner's high. When I was going over the bridges, it was really pretty scary, but the rest of the time was really, really good. And so much so, when I talked about with probably 13 other teammates who had similar experiences, by the time they got above 20 miles, 25 miles, they started having these really pleasant hallucinations. We actually talked about naming our team the next time we raced. We said next year, but then COVID. We were going to name our team Dope Hallucies because we really liked, everyone was like, these hallucinations are crazy. So, biblical image of mind-altering spirituality, that the goal of spirituality is mind and mood-altering. That's the point of it, to change your mind and to change your mood, right? Feel more loved, be more loving. Then you also have sort of this picture of an honest, but in a sense, a really positive connection between my relationship with substances and my sense of calling to do something with my spiritual vocation. And then finally, a biological image of mind-altering and mood-altering substances delivered by the greatest pusher and addict of them all, the human brain. So when we ask a question like, should Christians drink alcohol? It doesn't even begin to scratch the surface of all the different directions we could take this. This series that we're in is attempting to help people overcome barriers that have influence on whether or not they participate in a spiritual community. One of those barriers for many people is how we relate to substances. In a culture that's built around social alcoholism and a war on drugs, is it any wonder that we're confused about how it is that we're supposed to relate to substances? Right? The leading cause of death in our country is obesity, and we're really worried about people smoking weed. Like, do we hear ourselves? Do we see ourselves? The social alcoholism and the war on drugs is fought with a wink and a nod by politicians and law enforcement who are also on alcohol and drugs. So let's get into it. This is the next video in the series, and then we'll have, I hope, a very good conversation. Check it out. Should Christians drink alcohol? Should is such a disempowering word, isn't it? It implies a binary, yes or no, right or wrong, and I think we all know it's more complicated than that. Alcohol can serve as a social technology for what the Bible calls feast. It gets people together, it gets us celebrating, and we form communities. For us, that happens over a mimosa at Sunday School brunch, over a pint at Pints and Parables. Alcohol can also be abused and really toxic. The point is, a spiritual community can and should be a place to learn to ask better questions, like how should Christians relate to substances? And as you'd imagine, there's not one answer. Even in the Bible, Collective started in a bar where Christians were encouraged to drink up and tip big, and I've been in recovery for alcohol going on 5 years. I can say that even though alcohol was permissible for me, it was no longer beneficial for me and my family in this church. So maybe a better question than should Christians drink alcohol is, how should Christians relate to substances? Whatever the substance, does your relationship with that substance make you more loving? Does it make you love yourself and love your neighbors more? Is it the next right thing to do? If it is, then drink up. And the truth is, if you know in your gut it's not the next right thing to do, it doesn't serve yourself and your neighbors, then there's help for that, and you shouldn't do it regardless of religion. Don't settle for how do I drink right when there's a community for how do I live well. If you shouldn't be drinking, you probably know it, regardless of religious rules. Whether you're actively using substances or actively in recovery for them, we understand that story, and there's a place for you here. Our sincere hope is that Collective is a place for anyone, but we know it's not for everyone. If you think it might be a place for you, we hope that you'll bring all your questions and your sense of humor. But enough about us. We really are so curious about you. Please join us Sunday nights at 5 here in downtown DeLand or at wearecollectivechurch.com. Your presence makes us who we are, and there's a place for you here. You guys, oh, thank you. Do you guys feel like you might know a person who you could send that video to and it would start a conversation? All right, I see some nods. Dave, come on up. I'm gonna actually scooch over here. We're gonna chat in a second. Curious about your layout here, why you're higher than me. If you have to ask, you'll never know.
Are you compensating there? What's going on?
Of course, always.
Okay.
Okay, so we started with, yeah, that's right. Now our heads are at the same height. So Collective started with an ultra-liberal approach to booze, so much so that like people were drinking in services even when we were, this is crazy. Looking back, I'm like, God, I was 10 years younger. So we were occupying a United Methodist building, a movement that's been historically temperance-oriented, and there were people drinking in the services and stuff. So very liberal with booze, lots of substances, plenty of weed. And if we're honest, I was getting daily like heart palpitations from the amount of Trilogy coffee. I mean, in the early days, it was like there were 3 or 4 20-ounce cold brews, and they were the most caffeinated. It was uncomfortable. My heart was not able to handle it. And my therapist has helped me realize I also was on a high the entire time on the adrenaline of creativity and flow and startup. So I alluded to in the video, the Apostle Paul says everything is permissible, but not everything is beneficial. We let people, in the early days, be Christian and drink. And part of the reason was because that was one of the things that the culture, sort of especially conservative Christian culture, had told people if they drink, they're bad. And part of what we wanted to say is like, you can have a beer in your hand and have good questions about God and faith and life and whatever. So it was permissible, but it wasn't beneficial for everyone. And so for a long time, it was really amazing. And then, this is awesome. Hey, Odin, come on.
It's right here.
There
you go.
So for a long time, this was really good. And then within, I can't remember, it might have been the second year we were in that building, we noticed there was one of the dudes who'd been around for a long time. And I think it was in one service, he ended up getting up 6 times to go get a refill. And we realized he'd put away a 6-pack in the front row during the service. And I was like, all right, we need to rethink this. We were like, hey, this liberal alcohol policy might have a downside too. And in addition to that, I, in the process, became powerless over alcohol, and my life became unmanageable. I was driving drunk, my marriage was falling apart. I was overworking and hiding and all sorts of stuff. So I got sober, got into recovery, and my first experience of that was Prohibition, Alcoholics Anonymous, the recovery program, which makes a ton of sense and is an essential part of recovery for tons of people, and especially depending on the substance, absolutely. And then I also went on to read a book by Russell Brand, it's up there, called Recovery. And in the beginning of that book, Russell Brand makes this observation that recovery has to take a couple different forms, because he said, I entered recovery first from drugs and alcohol. And I knew that I was powerless over drugs and alcohol, and I couldn't have them, so I had to abstain from them. No more drugs and alcohol. He said, then I realized I was addicted to food and sex. And he's like, I want to eat every day, and I like having sex. So it required not abstinence, but a different relationship with the substance of his addiction. Not only prohibition, but relationship. And you can hear from the answers of people in this room, but especially if you look into the history of religion, there has been a tension always between prohibition and relationship, right? How much can we trust people with substances before we just say you can't do anything because we're scared of it and we can't control it? That's been religion for thousands of years, trying to figure that out. The point is, what the video made, spirituality is not in discovering the right black and white answer. For us, spirituality is in creating safety to look at yourself and creating safety to have this conversation together, not in a way that shuts each other down, not in a way that judges, not in a way that shames, not in a way that assumes that the way we do things is the right way for everyone, but to take a bunch of honest self-reflection first. Before we pass a single judgment on the way somebody else uses substances, that we understand that more than anything, this is a mirror. This is not a lens for you to look at a single other person in this room or in your world than yourself. It's a mirror. Dave, give us a quick perspective, both as a pastor who has a perspective on how we read the texts, and then also as a mental health professional, how these stories we tell impact our self-perception, mental health, and our sense of belonging, especially stories about addiction.
So I'm turning you into a narrative therapist already. I loved, you talked about storing things during
Yeah.
that. Like what is your... and
I'm
what
being
is your-
transformed by the renewing of my mind.
Well, that's not you, that's Paul.
Sure.
I mean,
Greatest form of flattery.
yeah, so I think when I think about alcohol, I think about substances. Hi, Jenny. Hi. This is my daughter.
Hey, Jenny.
You'll say hi? I think about everything that is part of our life we have a relationship with. I have a relationship with food, I have a relationship with coffee, I have a relationship with alcohol, a relationship with pot. So the question is not, again, you said this in the video, is drinking okay or not? It's what does that relationship look like? I think, I look at Paul telling Timothy, hey, drink some wine for your stomach. Effectively, you're stressed out, you need to stop stressing out, go drink some wine so you chill out.
An early anxiety prescription.
Yeah,
perhaps.
early anxiety prescription. The reality is for me, there are days that I come home, that I am overwhelmed, and I'm stressed out, and I just want a glass of wine or 2 or 3. And the reality is that is not an unhealthy relationship necessarily. If that was every day for months and months and months, yes, I can see that. Jenny, stop playing with the car, please. Thank you.
If you ever wonder what we mean by intergenerational community in the community statement, this is it.
Yep, she's right here. But instead, I think every one of us utilize substances for a reason. There is a purpose for which we have started using a substance. For most of the alcoholics I meet, they started drinking.
Can we take those shoes off, please? We can't hear anything in here. We're having a tough time conversating. Thank you.
Conversating. But I think, I don't even remember where I was.
Me either. Oh, so
Most people begin
addiction comes from
interacting-
coping,
yeah.
like it's
Yeah.
trying to solve a
So,
problem.
Yeah, most people interact with a substance for the purpose of solving a problem of some sort. I'm tired a lot, therefore I'm going to drink more coffee, therefore I'm more awake.
Yeah.
Right? And for the alcoholic, for someone who's addicted to drugs, those substances started as a helpful substance. And I think we've got to start there because we don't wake up in the morning and think, hey, how can I screw my life up? How can I right now become addicted to something that's going to make me a terrible father, it's going to make me yell at my kids, it's going to make me drive drunk, the things that you've...
Thanks a bunch.
You're welcome. The things that you've alluded
Sounds
to.
worse
like,
when you say it to me like that.
You're welcome.
It's good for me.
Yeah, but we don't wake up in the morning thinking, I want to consume this for this reason.
Yeah.
Instead, we look for coping mechanisms throughout our lives, and whatever those things are, they generally are helpful at the beginning.
Yeah. Or the reason we go looking for them.
Yeah, the
is
reason we go
yeah.
looking for them. And so I would say, there is a strength in you for the fact that you found alcohol to mitigate the anxieties that you were experiencing in life. So that is a positive spin on, instead of looking at a person ashamed for the fact that they became an alcoholic and look at all these bad things, you had the strength to find something to help cope with your problem.
Yeah.
At some point, though, that became not beneficial for you, or it wasn't the best coping mechanism.
Yeah.
I deal with high schoolers in the counseling room that smoke pot for anxiety. They just need to go drive their truck somewhere and smoke in their truck, and their anxiety goes down.
That was my little brother. He had crazy ADD. He'd be like this all day in school, and then
Right.
he'd get off just to like hit baseline. He'd have to.
Yeah, so I'm not going to look at him and say, hey, you know what, that's absolutely terrible. He has found something. Is that the best option for him long-term to mitigate anxiety? No. But this is a high schooler that has found a way to fit in with his friends and has found a way to manage his anxiety without being an adult and the ability to go to a doctor and choose these things on his own. So
Right.
more power to him for the fact that he found these things.
Yeah.
For a number of people that I know that are addicted to drugs, drugs are the thing that have kept them from killing themselves.
Yeah.
It's the dopamine release that they need to not take their own lives. And so I want to stop looking, I guess, at the substance or at the reason people use it and giving people a reason to feel ashamed about their lives for what it is that they did or are doing.
Yeah, and I guess so the invitation with us, especially if we are going to try to look at people, it's not It's intentionally avoiding that scapegoat mechanism and any judgment, and instead really looking with compassion, understanding that people move to substances to meet a need, address a problem, deal with pain, all of these things we've talked about. And so part of what Dave and I were saying is there is a need. There's a need before you even get to dealing with whatever substances and struggle you may be dealing with, first to let yourself off the hook. I mean, I think that's one of the biggest things is just people find themselves in unhealthy, untenable relationships with substances, and they also think I'm a bad person, and it's my fault. And I think part of what we're trying to say is there is a compassionate story about the source of your addiction. Like you said, you didn't wake up thinking, I want to be addicted. And it's not a good, bad thing. It's a question about what is this substance doing for you? How does it serve you? And then is it serving you? Is it hurting you? Back to the video, is it making you more loving? Is it adding to your life or is it taking away? Is there a perfect perspective on using substances? Dave, you have an answer?
Straight abstinence.
Yeah.
No, I do. So those of us in the room recognize we need community in our lives. I think the gospel and who we understand Jesus to be is one who built community. I think within community, Ben, how many times did you have people in your life express any type of concern about drinking?
A bit.
And so the question is, when we relate to substances, when we relate, this call within spirituality is that we are asking those of us that are around us to help us to become the full, fulfilled people that we are called to be.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can use the word called up here, but I will.
Sure.
And so the question is, when we see each other in an unhealthy relationship with a substance, in an unhealthy relationship with anger, as, I look at that as well, you can have anger as an addiction. It is a coping mechanism to solve a problem that is in your life.
Yeah.
Now, what?
You're getting hallelujahs.
And so it's not a chemical addiction in the same way. It's not, but the way that we choose to relate, cutting right now,
Yeah.
is a coping mechanism.
Yeah.
We can have hurting yourself, I would say, I have, I believe this is bad.
Yeah.
I would not say, hey, yeah, just a little bit of cutting is okay.
Right.
But it is a coping mechanism that right now, until you find another better coping mechanism, it may be the only thing that's allowing you a release to stay alive.
Yeah.
But I think within our community, we can ask for and help each other around us find healthier coping mechanisms. If that's, hey, you're getting stoned every day because you're anxious, maybe the answer is go to a counselor or go to a doctor and see if there is something you can do
Right.
to mitigate the anxiety as opposed to living your whole life stoned.
Yeah.
As well, religion can be just as much of an addiction or
Sure.
a chemical addiction as,
Yeah.
what? Man, I'm getting more of this than you do.
Yeah. It's disheartening, isn't it?
But religion can serve the same purpose. I mean, whatever these things are, we have this relationship so that we can get a dopamine release, so that we can feel better about ourselves and feel more
Yeah.
okay where we are.
Yeah.
And so I think the question is not, straight abstinence long-term is something that's possible with alcohol.
Yeah.
Something that's possible with pot, with various drugs. But by creating straight abstinence, it's almost like cutting off a family member. You're not allowing that relationship to ever come back and to ever decide what is this relationship.
Right.
It is beneficial to a lot of people, and if you find yourself struggling with substances, AA and straight abstinence from substances, I still believe is the best way to go from here to wherever you go in the future. But we're finding harm reduction long term is there are a lot of alcoholics that can learn to relate to alcohol and have one beer after being an alcoholic.
Yeah.
But it is a long way down the road when they have learned to control their own impulses.
Yeah.
And so, again, I think it's one of those, within community, we find
Sure.
some of the help that we need to find more healthy coping mechanisms.
Yeah, and I think there's no doubt, I mean, I already know just because I know the people who are involved in the congregation, that there are people who will feel very strongly because they have strict recovery backgrounds and will be anti-harm reduction, and people who feel totally opposite, and that's okay. Part of what we're saying is we're not trying to like do the research and arrive at the right like collective liberal answer. We're trying to say there isn't one. Right? That there are many ways to relate to substances. Ultimately, it has to come back to the question of, is your relationship with that substance serving you? Is it serving your neighbor? Is it making you more whole? Is it putting you together or is it pulling you apart? And this word, you know, the question, is there a perfect perspective on using substances? I think the only way there can be is if we change our definition of perfection. From arrival and completion to maturity. That's sort of an interesting nuance in the Hebrew understanding of perfect. There's a passage that says, be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. Not perfect in the sense of we're fixed, we're done, we're unchanging, but perfect in the sense of grown up or mature. And so I think, yes, there is a grown up and mature perspective on substances. And it's the ability to look at yourself, the ability to honestly evaluate how it is that you're relating to substances, using, eliminating, any of that stuff. That's growth. And it's okay, and like, it's interesting, you know, people's relationship with substances, to Dave's point, mirrors a lot of people's relationships to religion. There are periods and there are seasons that are very fundamentalist. There are seasons that are a little bit more open, a little bit more progressive. And people are in different seasons, in the room, in life. And so I think in order to avoid that kind of judgment, we've got to look at ourselves first.
You know, one of the things I wanted to throw out, I'm going to interrupt you here. This is fun when you give me a mic.
I was pausing, so.
And I'm going to sell out Terry since he wouldn't say what he said earlier. You're welcome.
Good.
One of the things we started talking about was, from a community standpoint, why is it that we can't gather around a Diet Coke or a Coke for conversation?
Yeah.
And one of the initiatives that we're looking at as, you know, the counseling co-op is, you know, to come downtown and to experience downtown on a weekend, you really can't join around anything other than a substance.
Yeah.
There is no good way to come out at 9 o'clock at night and feel like you are part of this town. And so it's an interesting self-fulfilling kind of issue here as we deal with what is our relationship with substances. For those that know that they need to be completely abstinent and away from, we're asking them to remove themselves from community.
Yeah.
And so I believe that is one of the primary reasons that we see relapse to the extent that we do is we don't have the ability to relate with each other outside of substance use.
Yes, there's the isolation that comes with changing your relationship with substances also. What are you guys hearing? Where does the conversation need to go? Jess?
What you were saying, and I completely agree, because I don't drink, and yeah, my hobbies are drinking. And so I'm like, what do I do? And like, could we get together like a group that just wants to stroll downtown, like no substances involved?
I'll help you in a minute, okay.
Is that a thing that we could do?
Yeah.
I do think that, and just said, could a group of us just get together and take a stroll downtown? One of the interesting things that I've been talking with and working with some bartenders about what are non-alcoholic options that you have. I don't know if anyone is in this world, but I am starting to love non-alcoholic beer. And there are actually some very good non-alcoholic beers now. It's not just O'Doul's anymore. And so Athletic Brewing has phenomenal non-alcoholic beer, and Persimmon has 3 of their beers on. Half the time when I meet my friends there, that's what I get, even though I'm not an alcoholic, I don't think. And I like beer, but we're starting to get some options. And so I think as you're in restaurants, if you start asking for those things, there's a way to come downtown, get a non-alcoholic beer, hang out with the same people. You're not getting judged as the person not drinking. How long did you and I both get club soda and lime at Da Vinci so it looked like we were drinking gin and tonic?
Still,
Yeah.
it's my go-to.
Because you feel judged if you're the person that gets Coke, but there are non-alcoholic wines out there. There are non-alcoholic beers. There's actually non-alcoholic liquor. It takes a lot to make it taste like anything valuable. But, so yeah, I do think that there are some options in town. Yeah, kombucha. Yeah.
So, yeah, Terry. You have a beautiful voice. Let's hear it on the microphone. For the people online,
Really loud. Now, I was just always wondering that, it's, or being told that it's not really the alcohol, it's not really the substance, it's the reason behind why.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, are we teaching people that are in recovery or, have had issues or, just bad experiences, how to handle one drink or two drinks, or are we trying to teach them what is initiating, what is bringing about the need for this? And
Yeah.
is there an alternative? Can you change the narrative of what this means to you? Like, it's the relationship with
Yeah. Well, and I think that's a great question because the answer is it's all those things. I think early in sobriety, it's probably a community that says you can't drink and you got to be around people that don't drink. And then I think maybe if they've also got a spiritual community where they're going, let me look inside and figure out what it is going on inside that makes me want to numb or run or whatever that I'm doing with alcohol. Yeah, absolutely. I'll come to you, Bill. Anybody else? Just make sure we get other perspectives. Dan, and then, oh yeah, go for it.
I just wanted to say, when I drank, I changed. The polite person that I am when I'm sober, I just don't care.
Yeah.
What comes out of my mouth would be embarrassing for me to be sober. And yet, I'm right in with the guys when I do it at the bar.
Yeah.
So I don't see how going out there and drinking with a bunch of drunks, sober, would be worth it, because I'd be miserable.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, and I think part of it, part of what Dave is saying is I think there are ways that we can adjust the social technology. And like I said, we live in a culture that is built on social alcoholism. Like, you can argue with me if you want, we're not going to waste our time here. But part of what Dave is saying is that the easiest way to disarm somebody, and that's why we started a church and a bar, right? Because if I come up to you and go, let's talk about Jesus, you'll run. But if I come up and I've got a beer and you've got a beer, and I'm like, let's talk about what sucks about life, then we'll have a good conversation. And I think that's disarming, to have a drink in your hand. But yeah, can it also go too far? I think the flip side of that is, so we can change our groups, we can do non-alcoholic beer. Part of it is we also need to be the leading edge of changing the culture that stigmatizes things that are no longer worth stigma. Like, it shouldn't be crazy for people to be out socially not drinking, and that be a crazy assumption that we're making, Like, that we have to adapt our alcoholic and non-alcoholic beer because people are so stigmatized for not drinking. I think we could also just change the culture.
People call it liquid courage for a reason.
Yeah.
And I think it takes courage to have a lot of conversations.
Yeah.
And that's a big part of alcoholism.
Yeah. Okay. So Joe said that it's called liquid courage for a reason, and a lot of people, they really do need that kind of extra bump in order to have a lot of conversations. It is mood altering in the sense that it makes you open, and I think that for me, a lot of that was I needed the courage to go have conversations with people that would normally have scared me, but I was starting a church and I needed to go meet people, and so yeah, I definitely get that.
I think as well, and then we're going to come to Bill, but for both of you guys, I know that for me, when I need to have a hard conversation or things feel awkward, having a barrier between me and them, and that can be a cup of coffee, honestly, that could be a Coke, whatever it is, it would be awkward to just have a hard conversation like this, but if I can sit here with a cup of coffee,
it would be tough.
Yeah, it's tougher, and so, yeah, I mean, I wish we still had a downtown that had a pool hall where two people could go and play pool. You can go.
Bill.
You can't all by yourself? Okay, I'll be back.
So many things you got.
There you go. I'll be
So many of the things that you gentlemen are talking about is ringing a lot of bells inside me. When I got in this field, to help those people. And I realized I had three fingers pointing back at me. And I had the same stinking thinking that they, quote unquote, did which is thought addiction. I have a thought, I think I have to think it, I think I have to believe it. While I treat my clients who have an alcohol problem, that's the primary thing we deal with first. But we got to get down to the bottom line is it's a God-shaped hole. There's an old saying that every addict I ever met is a frustrated mystic. And they're trying to fill a God-shaped hole. And we live in a society that's addicted. And a guy I know wrote a book called How Do You Breathe Underwater? Because that's what it's like to live in a society that's sick and try to be sane and sober. His name is Richard Rohr. And
That's the benediction.
oh, good.
That poem.
Good,
Yeah,
I'm getting
it's
ahead.
beautiful.
So the bottom line for me is belonging, as you said. If there's a cure, quote unquote, not that there's a cure, but if there's a treatment for addiction, it's belonging. And that's AA has proven it for over 80 years, but not just AA. Many groups have proven you can get sober, you can be healthy if you're in relationship.
Yeah.
And it's connected with the God-shaped hole.
Well, and I think one of the things, to kind of wrap that up, I think one of the things that AA does best in that regard is, that I think the church has failed miserably at, is even though the sole purpose of AA is recovery, you are also unconditionally accepted even if you're using. And I think the failure of the church is that it can identify ideal behaviors that it wants from people, but it can't help but reject them on the front end. You know, rather than being a companion that says, we think this way of living could be more healthy and whole, it says, if you do that, you're out. And I think that's been our relationship to substances for way too long. And so part of what Collective is trying to repair is to say, wherever you are in that relationship, that doesn't preclude you from spirituality. And in fact, as you address your relationship with substances, it's going to impact your spirituality and vice versa.
Yeah, we had a running joke up in New York, because in New York you have basements. And we used to say there was more spirituality going on in the basement during the week in a 12-step meeting than it was upstairs on a Sunday. Not in all churches, but in many.
In a lot of them, yeah. Michelle, toss it over there, Bill. Don't toss it.
Don't toss it.
Don't toss it.
So I have a lot to say on this subject, but the only thing I'm going to say is that I can't really say what I want to because I work for a religious organization, and I just want to...
That sucks. Sorry.
And I just want to, I guess, remind us that there's another player in this conversation, and that's the people in power who have authority to make laws and policies and who drive a capitalist culture that has this quasi-Christian value set. I would be having a much different conversation if I could do that without fear of repercussion. And I believe strongly, I'm a different person because of my experiences with this. But the bigger perspective, if we draw out the perspective, why do we think that some substances are okay and some are not, and some are morally acceptable and some are not, some are socially acceptable? You've said many times, social alcoholism. I am here to tell you, as a product of Volusia County Schools, this county has an alcohol problem. And it is more socially acceptable to drink people in the streets. We close them down all the time. I took a shot of Fireball while I ran a 5K yesterday. Not a good idea, P.S.
Chip Wilson's still out there.
Yeah, thanks, Chip Wilson. But I just want to invite us to remember that what we feel are our gut moral convictions about substances were formed by people who had different agendas than what we have in this room, which is not shaming each other, not putting ourselves higher than each other. Benjamin.
The people in the back are taller than me.
And I just want to give voice to that kind of silent player here, that our assumptions and our values are based on sometimes an unspoken but a very real social fabric that we all live in.
Yep.
And that's as much as I can say.
Well, thank you. We'll read between the lines. Dan. Look at that beard, too. Don't drop it.
I'd just like to say, the reason why AA works is why collective cares works, why community groups work, because if you start saying you can say whatever you want and you will be safe, then you don't have to put those barriers between you. If you know you're in a safe place, then you automatically don't need to use those mechanisms, but we don't offer those enough.
Yeah.
I was going to go into this long story about how a drug changed my life, but I think it's more important for us to identify we have to set up these safe places to discuss spirituality, sexuality, everything without shame and without shaming anyone. And once you do that, you don't have that need to put those barriers between your emotions and someone else.
Yeah.
And you can have honest conversations.
Yeah.
They are difficult. They are supposed to be.
Yeah.
Because we've set up these rules in our society. But once you take away those rules and you make a place safe, you don't need to hide anymore. You don't need to feel guilt anymore. You can let go. And you know, if you go to an AA meeting, you're going to hear some of the most embarrassing stories you've ever heard.
Yeah.
And the reason why is because people feel safe.
Yeah.
And so there's no need to put that barrier between you and everyone else. You can be completely honest.
Yeah. Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Dave. You know, everybody has said there's so much more we could say. Bill, Michelle, Dave, me, Dan. There's a ton more we could say. And the whole point of this sermon in the series is that there is not an answer. What you take from here is your personal spirituality, which is your relationship with substances. If you're having substance abuse issues and you would like help, or you're not sure, but you think that maybe you'd like to talk to somebody, we do have limited resources, but we have resources. For tonight, come find me, you can find Dave, you can find Michelle, Heather, Bill. There's lots of people who would be willing to talk to you. We have lists of different recovery meetings that you can go to. Hopefully we're going to start some recovery groups here in the near future.
For anyone that cares, we have Alcoholics Anonymous in this county, Narcotics Anonymous, Sexaholics Anonymous, Codependence
Coda.
Group, Coda Group. Any others that I'm missing? What? Gambling abuse, smoking groups, Celebrate Recovery if you would rather have the more Christian version. So those groups are all over this county. And there are, from an AA standpoint, I believe there are 10 to 15 meetings on this side of the county every day.
Yeah, it's pretty good. It's pretty active. And there's, I think Intergroup has apps and stuff now, so you can find all that stuff. Sometimes you can't tell if we're doing it or if it's working. Thank you guys for this, because this is not, I mean, you could feel the tension in the first conversation. It's not an easy conversation to have, because we're not just formed by our culture and formed by sort of value sets. These are also our families. These are also like decades of decisions we've made based on stories other people have told us about substances, about sexuality, about, this is not easy work, and I respect you guys a ton. And thank you for being here to do the work. It's really, really important. In a moment, we're going to come and receive this good gift, the open table, the Eucharist. It's a symbol for us and our tradition of the humanity of God in the body of Christ with each one who comes. May this table open you in vulnerability to feel more loved. May it give you the courage to be more loving. The table of the kind of acceptance that we're talking about tonight. It's interesting in our culture, what is cruciform? What does it mean to choose to sacrifice, to choose to give something up?
To be un-American?
Yeah, to be un-American, yeah. Yeah, maybe at the beginning to lay down, let's say for tonight, to lay down our judgment of ourselves for the ways that we're using substances. Is there something you can do about it? Probably. You know, the serenity prayer, maybe there's something you can change. There are things you can't change. You live in the culture you live in. You've been told the stories you've been told. You grew up how you grew up. Things were available that were available to you. So first of all, you're using substances. That's okay. It's not your fault. But then the other is true too. You have a way of seeing the world, and without even thinking about it consciously, of judging people who use things in different ways than you do. And the invitation to this table is to set that down, to choose not to lean into that judgment. If it happens like we do in meditation, to see it, but less and less to feel it, and more to let it go. The table of this openness is set for us and for all people, and no one will ever be turned away. Come, let's share with one another this meal and these words, bread for the journey and nourishment for the soul. Come when you're ready. I don't think Sharon's here if you want to serve.
I've done some damage. I've cut the rope so it frayed. And I've got a lot of good friends keeping me distracted, keeping me sanity safe. Here I stand on the edge of the ledges I made, looking for a steady hand. Here I stand in a land full of rocks in the valleys, trying to be a better man for you. But I drink a little too much, it makes me nervous. I've got my grandfather's blood, and I take a little too much without giving back. If blessed are the meek, then I'm cursed. Here I stand on the edge of the ledges I made, looking for a steady hand. Here I stand in the land full of rocks in the valleys, trying to be a better man for you. I want to learn how to love, not just a feeling. There are the consequences. I want to learn how to love, give it all back. Forgive me all that I've done. for a steady hand. Here I stand in a land full of rocks in the valleys, trying to be a better man. Oh, here I stand on the edge of the ledges I've made, looking for a steady hand. Oh, here I stand in a land full of rocks in the valleys, trying to be a better man for you.
Thanks so much for joining us in person and online. Thanks again for making financial support a part of your practice at collectivegives.com. Make your plan to stay connected. We are collectivechurch.com. You can update your preferences, customize your engagement. If you are willing to share what you've found and help others to find it, also give us a review on Facebook or Google. Again, share those videos. So far we've done non-denominational, open and affirming, progressive, and then tonight, substances and spirituality. So share those videos out, get the conversation going and continued. Let Kenny know that you love him. The card is going to be up here on the bar. Please, everybody come and sign it. Even if you don't know him, just say, Kenny, we love you, because you do. For benediction this evening, this beautiful poem by Carol Balick called Breathing Underwater. I built my house by the sea. Not on the sands, mind you, not on shifting sand, and I built it on a rock. A strong house by a strong sea, and we got well acquainted, the sea and I, good neighbors. Not that we spoke much, we met in silences, respectful, keeping our distance, but looking our thoughts across the fence of sand. Always the fence of sand our barrier, always the sand between us. And then one day, and I still don't know how it happened, the sea came without warning, without welcome even. Not sudden and swift, but a shifting across the sand like wine, less like the flow of water than the flow of blood. Slow, but coming. Slow, but like an open wound. And I thought of flight, and I thought of drowning, and I thought of death. And while I thought, the sea crept higher till it reached my door. And I knew then there was neither flight, nor death, nor drowning, that when the sea comes calling, you stop being neighbors, well-acquainted, friendly at a distance neighbors, and you give your house for a coral castle, and you learn to breathe underwater. Let's bring our hands together as a symbol of our intention, first to our forehead for clarity of thought, to our lips for clarity of speech, to our hearts for clarity of action, so that in all that we say and do, love would be our first thought, our first word, and our first deed. Grace and peace. The room can stay set up.